spoken once, before the first wheel turn. Same hushed cadence as the script. Bored quietly, this carriage collects the sound of every name you've ever forgotten to remember. Pause, let the sentence echo like a last breath before sleep. Sit back. The night will keep your secrets, but the tracks will not. The wheels of the wooden train turned with a patient rhythm, as though it had traveled the same path for centuries. Lanterns swung gently above the passengers, casting tired shadows across the carriage. The fog outside pressed against the window glass, pale and soft, like a memory trying to be remembered. No one on the train spoke loudly. Their voices, when they did appear, were no louder than breaths. It was as if the night itself demanded silence. The only voice strong enough to exist here was the whisper of the wheels, the creaking wood, and the delicate tapping of branches brushing against the sides as the train passed through forests. Among the passengers sat an old woman wrapped in a faded shawl, her hair silver as moonlit frost. She kept her eyes closed, yet her presence felt awake, like she could see more than anyone else. Travelers around her pretended not to stare, but every so often a curious glance slipped in her direction. People don't worry about strangers unless something about them feels familiar, and she felt strangely familiar, like a forgotten face from a dream. Beside her sat a young man in plain clothing. His fingers kept drumming nervously against his knees. Gaze shifted from window to floor to the old woman, then back to the window, as though looking for something outside might help him find something inside. He didn't know why this train felt wrong, or why it felt important, or why every mile it traveled made him feel lighter, as if pieces of him were falling away with each turn of the wheels. He finally gathered the courage to speak. His voice trembled like a candle flame. "Where does this train go?" He wasn't sure who he asked, but the old woman opened her eyes the moment he spoke. She turned toward him slowly, her gaze soft yet piercing, like she had been waiting for his question. She answered gently, as if the truth must be handled with care. "To where your memories sleep, and where they stop belonging to you." Her words settled into the air like dust. The young man frowned, confused, but before he could speak again, she closed her eyes once more, as though the conversation had already ended. The fog outside thickened, turning the world beyond the windows into shifting gray nothingness. The train felt like it was floating through emptiness, through a world made of quiet breath and whispering trees. Then, faintly, a shape appeared outside. A forest so dense that its trees leaned over the tracks like a crowd of bent giants, their branches twisted like fingers trying to reach the train. The lantern light flickered as shadows of leaves danced across the passengers' faces. The young man inhaled sharply. He didn't remember this forest. He didn't remember ever seeing trees like these. They were too tall, too old, too familiar, without belonging to any place he knew. Every traveler stared out the windows, not because they wanted to, but because they could not look away. "Quinn." The old woman did not open her eyes, yet she smiled as though she could see everything they saw. Her voice came again, quiet and slow. "The forest remembers what people forget." The young man whispered back, confused, "What do you mean?" The old woman's smile disappeared. "Some memories do not wish to return. They sleep for a reason." He shivered, though no cold touched him. The lanterns rattled above, and the fog outside cleared just enough to reveal the silhouette of old wooden houses among the trees. The houses leaned crookedly, their roofs wilted like tired shoulders, their doors slightly open as though they expected someone or remembered someone. The young man leaned toward the window, his breath fogging the glass. Something about those houses pulled at him, a feeling like a thread tugging at his chest. He felt as though he had stood in this forest once, walked between those houses, maybe even lived in one, but he knew that was impossible. He had never been here, yet the feeling grew stronger. The woman beside him spoke softly without opening her eyes. 2. Do not try to remember. Memories come back stronger when they are chased away. Her words only deepened his confusion. He tried to pull himself back into his seat, but some part of him kept staring at the houses until the forest slowly faded behind them. The fog swallowed the world again. The young man pressed a hand against his chest, as though making sure something remained there. Tunt, he whispered, almost afraid to hear himself. Why does it feel familiar? The old woman's voice floated like drifting smoke. Because forgetting is not the same as losing. Some memories are buried. Some memories try to return. Some should not. The young man swallowed, his throat tight. He didn't know why her words frightened him more than the forest. The train rattled, and another passenger across from them began quietly sobbing into her hands. The sound was muffled, weak, as though she cried for something she didn't understand. Near the window, a man in a dusty coat stared blankly into the fog. His eyes glazed, as though remembering hurt more than forgetting. The train continued forward, the wheels turning like slow heartbeat echoes. The old woman whispered once more, so quietly the young man wasn't sure if she truly spoke or he imagined it. The train is not here to take you somewhere. It is here to return what was left behind. The train exhaled a long sigh as it slowed, the way an old animal lowers itself to the ground after walking all night. The lanterns above the passengers dimmed to the color of dying embers. Outside, the fog folded back like curtains, revealing a station that had no name on any map. The platform boards were gray with age. The nails that once held them had rusted into stains shaped like tiny stars. No lamp lit the station, except the train itself, and even that light seemed unwilling to step onto the planks. The conductor appeared in the aisle, though no one had seen him enter. His uniform was the color of wet ash, and the brass buttons had lost their shine to a dullness that looked almost soft. He did not speak. He only raised a hand, palm open, as if asking for something no one could name. One by one, passengers rose. Their bodies moved before their minds decided, like sleepwalkers answering a bell that rang inside their bones. The young man stayed seated, palms pressed to his thighs, heart fluttering against his ribs like a trapped moth. The old woman beside him opened her eyes fully for the first time. They were the color of rain that has fallen and risen again as mist. She placed her hand over his wrist, not to restrain, but to steady. "You may step off," she murmured, "but the platform is made of questions you have already asked yourself." He tried to find her pulse against his skin, yet felt only the slow turning of the train's wheels transmitted through the floorboards. Across the aisle, the woman who had been sobbing now stood, tears dried into faint silver trails. Her mouth formed a small circle of wonder, as though she had just heard her childhood nickname spoken by a stranger. She walked toward the door, each footfall sounding softer than the last, until the planks received her like deep snow. The man in the dusty coat followed, leaving behind only the faint scent of cedar and kerosene. Soon the carriage was half empty, and the remaining seats seemed to sigh outward, reclaiming the space. The conductor waited on the bottom step, face unreadable, eyes lowered as if reading invisible names on a list. The old woman released the young man's wrist and stood slowly, vertebrae unfolding like the pages of an ancient book. She did not look back at him. She looked only toward the darkness beyond the platform, where a path of pale stones glimmered briefly and then vanished. Before she stepped down, she spoke one last sentence into the air. Not to him, not to anyone, yet it landed inside his chest like a pebble dropped into a well. Whatever you leave here will wait for you, but it will not wait forever. Then she too was gone, absorbed into the fog that now crept onto the train and curled around the legs of the seats. Carrot. The young man found himself alone in the carriage, except for the conductor, who still stood outside, hand extended. He realized the hand was not beckoning. It was simply open, offering balance to whoever might need it. A breeze moved through the car, carrying the smell of damp earth and something sweeter, perhaps lilac, perhaps memory. He rose. His knees felt hollow, as though the bones had been replaced by reeds. Each step toward the door took longer than it should, the distance stretching like taffy pulled in winter. When he reached the threshold, the conductor finally lifted his gaze. The eyes were the same gray as the platform boards, but inside them flickered a single point of lantern light, steady and small. The young man set his foot on the top step. The wood was warm, as if countless journeys had left their heat behind. He descended. The fog closed around him. Soft as the scarf his mother used to wrap around his mouth before sending him out to play in the first snowfall. Beneath his shoes the planks gave slightly exhaling dust that rose and hung like suspended breath. Ahead, the pale stones appeared again, one by one, leading away from the station into trees that were taller than the train, taller than thought. He walked behind him. The train sighed once more, a sound like a book closing, and the wheels began to turn, carrying the empty seats onward. He did not look back. He felt the track pull away from his spine, the way a scab finally releases skin. The path narrowed, branches arched overhead, weaving a ceiling so dense that the night itself seemed woven into it. His footsteps grew quieter, as though the ground were absorbing sound the way cloth absorbs spilled wine. After a time he could not count the minutes, for his watch had stopped at the hour he first boarded. He saw a clearing. In its center stood a single tree, bark white as bone, leaves black and glossy like crow feathers. From one low branch hung a child's swing, a wooden plank suspended by two frayed ropes that moved without wind. The swing creaked forward and back, a slow heartbeat. He approached. On the seat lay a small tin soldier, green paint chipped, one arm raised in eternal salute. He recognized it the way one recognizes one's own pulse, without surprise, without joy, only the quiet certainty of continuity. He lifted the soldier. The metal was cold, yet it warmed instantly against his palm, as though it had been waiting for the heat of his skin to remember life. A sound rose behind him, not footsteps, but the soft collapse of something heavy settling into earth. He turned. The old woman sat on a stump that had not been there moments before. Her shawl was gone. Instead, she wore a coat the color of river stones, buttoned to the throat. She regarded him with the same mist-colored eyes, but now they held a gentleness that felt almost like forgiveness. "You found the first piece," she said. He looked again at the soldier, then at her. "Cress, will I remember everything?" he asked, voice rough, as if unused for years. She shook her head once, slowly, the way a tree denies the wind. "You will remember enough to choose what to carry back." He closed his fingers around the toy. The clearing dimmed, not from darkness but from a soft erasure, as though an unseen hand were rubbing charcoal from paper. When he opened his hand again, the soldier was gone. Only a faint green stain remained on his lifeline. He looked up. The old woman had risen and was walking away between the trees, her coat blending with the trunks until she became only vertical shadow. He followed, not because he understood, but because the path itself had begun to fade, and movement felt like the only remaining language. Deeper in the forest, the air grew warmer, carrying the scent of bread cooling on a windowsill, of iron railings heated by summer sun, of skin after bathing. He saw other objects half buried in moss, a marble with a spiral of blue, a single roller skate, a postcard addressed in handwriting he almost knew. Each time he touched one, it dissolved, leaving a stain, a scent, a hush of almost trickled laughter. With every disappearance, his chest grew heavier, as though the things themselves were entering him, compacting into a small, dense stone behind his sternum. Finally, the trees parted. He stepped into a second clearing, round and perfect as the inside of a teacup. Tat. At its center stood a doorframe alone. No walls, no house, just upright boards and a hinged door, painted the same faded red as the train's lanterns. The handle was a brass loop that mirrored the conductor's buttons. He understood, without words, that this was the last threshold. Behind him, the forest had already vanished. Only gray space remained, like paper not yet drawn upon. He reached for the handle. Before his fingers touched brass, he felt the weight in his chest shift, then rise, moving up his throat like a bubble of air from deep water. He opened his mouth, and a sound came out, not a word, but the precise pitch of a whistle he had once blown to call a dog that never came home. The door swung inward, white light spilled out, neither harsh nor gentle, simply complete. He stepped through. The clearing, the door, the forest, the train all folded into themselves, the way a map closes upon the place you have finally reached. Spoken after the final white light folds the world away. Voice even softer, almost a lullaby in reverse. The train moves on, lighter by one silence. Somewhere behind you, a tin soldier stands guard over nothing, and a swing keeps the heartbeat you left. Close your eyes not to sleep, but to keep the door from opening again. The station has no name, and you were never here. Yet, the dust on your shoes remembers the planks that asked no ticket.